So, hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Renee Marinelli. I'm the Director of Advising with Med School Coach, and I got on the line. I have Dr. Harvey Katzen and Dr. Ed Lipsit. They're two of America's most wanted master advisors with Med School Coach. So thank you for everyone joining us. I know that this is a super hectic time right now as far as getting in your applications and kind of getting nervous about everything coming together. Someone just said they can't hear me. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up if you could put in the chat. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. So I appreciate that. Looks like everyone can hear. Great. So I know that this is stressful. You've got to get your application in time. You're waiting for letters of recommendation, transcripts, all of those things. So let's try to have a little bit of fun tonight, but still be informative of what you should be doing to prepare your application right now. We'll have a couple polls in here. Please feel free to use the Q&A chat function as well, and then at the end we'll do a kind of round table and try to answer questions. So please use the Q&A function for the questions, and then if you have anything that comes up, you guys can't hear me, something freezes, definitely the chat function is great for that. So here we all are again, just for another reference. Let's get right into a poll. So all of the questions are up there. That's kind of funny. Can you guys vote on the poll? Okay. Well, all of the questions are up there, so we'll just pull up the results as they go. So first question right now is, when are you all applying to medical school? So I'll let it go up a couple more minutes and then I'll show it to everyone. We can kind of look to see who our audience is tonight. All right. So most of you said that you're applying now, which is great. This webinar is definitely for you. This is going to go through the things that you should be thinking about and getting ready to do if you haven't done so already. And for everybody else that's not sure or applying in the next couple of years, you're definitely going to glean some information on what to expect when you do apply. So let me stop sharing that, and I will quickly just go over a little bit of the timeline, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Katzen. So probably most people are aware of these dates. We are right in the midst of the application opening. AMCAS opened last week, and so did AMCAS and TDM-SAS, which is the Texas application. AMCAS is the osteopathic application. As you can see, you can't submit AMCAS until May 30th. The other ones allow you to submit right away. AMCAS, however, if you submit now, schools don't receive that application until June 15th. So there's not a huge rush to submit it right away. Texas, you definitely want to work on submitting that sometime in May, early June. So this is kind of the timeline, and Dr. Katzen and Dr. Lipsit, I'm sure will speak more to this, and of course we'll answer questions at the end. So Dr. Katzen, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, and welcome to everyone, and welcome to the co-hosts, Dr. Marinelli and Dr. Lipsit. One of the things that I think the three of us would like to get across to you tonight is that timeliness and being careful and compulsive about how you do the application is very important. One of the things that you can do now for all three, Texas, the osteopath and the MD application, is you can either begin to fill them out as Dr. Marinelli just showed you, or they can actually begin to be submitted. One of the first things that we recommend is that you request the transcripts as soon as possible. And as you go through the first couple of sections of really all of the applications, the first things you enter are obviously your demographics, your name, address, your contact information, but you very quickly don't get to a part where you can print out, as you see in front of you, the official request form for your transcripts to be given to your registrar. And as indicated, the sooner you do that, the better. Believe it or not, you're not the only one applying to medical school or law school. So the registrar's office is getting a lot of requests right now, certainly as the final grades are being placed. And even though they may not send them until the final grades have been posted in the next couple of weeks, they are lining up. Basically, they're going to be sending the transcripts for those of you who have submitted first. So the good thing about what you see in front of you, it is the official form from the AAMC. It has your ID number and pertinent information right on it. And I think as one of the next slides are going to show, it's very important to be careful. Grammar, punctuation, capitalization, counts all the way through the application.
Yeah, Dr. Katzen, before we go to that, a couple people have asked about the transcript requirements, and I think it's important to note that you pretty much have to send a transcript from any school that you ever attempted a college course at. Even if you didn't get credit for it, even if you didn't finish the course, you still have to request a transcript. So the AMCAS has very, very specific language on the transcript request and which, if any, schools you don't have to request transcripts from. So if there's any question, definitely check out AMCAS. They will have an answer for you. But pretty much any school that you took a college course at, even if you took it in high school, you need to. High school transcripts, though, do not have to be sent, which is, at least that's one nice thing.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as you can see on this slide, what we are trying to indicate is punctuation, capitalization, counts. When, all three of us that you're looking at have been admissions officers, and when you're dealing with 10, 12, 15,000 applications, one of the things we look at is how careful are you? Are you compulsive? Do you capitalize names of your city and whatnot? And believe it or not, when you have 10,000 applicants applying for 150 slots, simple things like this appear to be careless or you didn't take the time. And unfortunately, they do count against you. So although we encourage you to fill the application out sooner rather than later, we always recommend that you proofread the entire application at least once or twice before, or even more before you actually hit the button to submit. I personally recommend that, at least with the AMCAS, it's easy to download it as a PDF. I don't think you can download it as a Word document, but you still have the ability to look at it line item by line item. So capitalization, believe it or not, is actually pretty important. It just is an indication of is somebody being lazy or are they being careful?
Mm-hmm. Great. I just want to remind everyone, please put your questions in the Q&A because that's where I'll be pulling the questions from after, and we'll try to get it to as many as possible.
And as Dr. Marinelli has already indicated, you need to put in every course you've taken that for which there was college credit, even ones you took in high school. Don't get upset if you don't see this part of the application as you're putting in your transcript, because this does not get calculated until it's been verified. So you will not see this during the time that you're actually filling out the application. I think the three of us would recommend that as you enter your information, you print out a copy of your transcript, have it in front of you, and just make very certain that every single course has been entered and entered carefully within the, obviously the appropriate grade and number of hours. I think we're going to show in just a second that it's very important to categorize your courses as either biology, chemistry, BCPM, math versus AO, all other. My recommendation is sometimes it's not clear. Certain psych courses, occasionally statistic courses, you may think are a science course, but either AMCAS and or your college may not. A couple of things. This is something that is on the AMCAS website. It will help you decide which are the BCPM courses and which are not. The other thing you can do if there continues to be questions is you can call AMCAS, but I also recommend you speak to your registrar, because they are the ones that are going to be sending the data to AMCAS or the osteopath or the Texas application service. So just sort of as a double check, if you're not 100% certain, I'd ask your registrar, and if you're still not certain, it may take you a while on the phone, particularly this time of year, but you can call AMCAS, and I think their hours have just been extended an hour or two longer during the day for this time of the year.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And there are a couple of parts of the application that I think we'll be referring to a couple this evening. One is obviously what we have, the transcript and the course information. The other is the personal statement in the activities section. In the activities section, you will have a drop down and you can categorize the activities, anything from volunteering, publication, research, etc. There's a number of categories that you can choose from. For the allopathic or the AMCAS application, you can enter 15 activities. Each of the activities you only are given you're only given 700 characters to describe them, but for 3 of them, you can indicate that they are most meaningful activities. So in addition to the 700 characters, not in place of, you're allowed to expand and let us know what the activity meant to you, what you got out of it, and you have an additional 1,325 characters where you can do that. And basically, as you're going through the application, you can only do that 3 times, and if you indicate yes, it's the most meaningful, an additional box which has a limit of characters will appear for you to enter that information into. We usually recommend, obviously, that you don't begin to write these online. You've already written them, and ideally you copy and paste them so that all of your grammar and spell checks have been done, because even if you have a great activity description, it would be a shame to then, as you're typing it in, to make spelling or other grammatical errors that weren't in your initial draft. Okay, and here is an example of the drop-down menu you have of the various types of activities. I think one point that I would like to make about this is, ideally, you want quality activities, not quantity. If you have 10 or 12 activities and they're good quality, I'd rather have that than 15 where 4 or 5 of them are not particularly quality, and clearly you're just trying to fill 15 boxes. The other thing that you want to think about is, it's nice if you can have a variety of activities. Show us that you're well-rounded. For example, if you were on the Dean's List 6 semesters, I would not use 6 of your activities to put Dean's List 1 semester at a time. Sometimes, for some of you that have done a lot of shadowing or a lot of volunteering, you may actually have to make some lists if you've done a tremendous amount, for example, of shadowing activities. And at the top, where they ask you for contact information, a number of hours in a situation such as shadowing, you might want to just utilize the one that was where you had the most hours or you had the most experience with. Okay. All right.
Sorry. Here we go.
Okay. In terms of the letters of recommendation, the minimum is 2 from science professors, 1 from a non-science professor, and depending on what you have done, whether it's been shadowing or volunteering or in research, you may want to add others. We certainly recommend that you request them early. If you're requesting them from an organic chemistry teacher who teaches 300 students a semester, he probably has a lot of other students who have requested, so the earlier the better. Now, some schools use a committee letter, and even though the committee letter is what ultimately will be sent to AMCAS, you still will have to accumulate individual professors to send to your university advising office so that they can form the committee letter. Most of the time, they're probably the committee or a representative of the committee and an in-school advisor will want to interview you or at least speak to you as they are forming the committee letter or the official letter that's going to come from the school. If your school does not have a committee letter, then what you see in front of you, 2 science and 1 non-science professors are the absolute minimum that you need. But in terms of character reference or to show other things you've done that have been meaningful, if you volunteered, if you were a teaching assistant, et cetera, those would be some of the other letters that you might want to send. The last point is that various schools accept a different number of letters of recommendation. Some may accept 5, some may accept 8. So you want to be careful about what schools you're assigning the various letters to. Okay.
Awesome. Let's do our next poll. So everybody kind of already answered this poll. So before we switch over to Dr. Lipsit here, how important is the personal statement? And I think everybody was on board saying that it is very important. So I totally agree with that. I think it's a huge part of the application. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Lipsit to talk more about that. Thank you, Dr. Katzen, so much. And we'll be sure to revisit some of those topics that Dr. Katzen discussed because I know lots of people had questions about them.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Well, my name is Ed Lipsit. I'd like to welcome everyone. And Dr. Katzen, Harvey, that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lipsit.
Now, basically what we're doing is we are dividing up the application into the components that make for a complete primary. And each component is important. And one of the reasons is that it is a highly competitive applicant pool.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Things went forward. There we go.
There we go. And the bottom line is that we're talking about an applicant pool with great metrics, highly accomplished, and how do you differentiate? And one of the ways of differentiating is by creating a personal statement and, as Dr. Katzen pointed out, an activity list that sort of stands out and can help to differentiate you. So even though, in all honesty, perhaps the most important parts of your application may be the metrics, the fact of the matter is everything is important, and that includes the personal statement. And you have to make it interesting. You have to understand that file reviewers may be reading hundreds and hundreds of applications, and the ability to attract their interest, having a good structure to your personal statement so that your introduction has what we call a hook or something that engages the reader. It's very important. You have to demonstrate your personal characteristics while explaining why you want to be a physician. I mean, that's really at the bottom of all this. Quality over quantity, as Dr. Katzen said, and that applies to almost every component in the application. Mm-hmm. Edit, and then edit again. Now, sometimes applicants say to me, well, what's the big deal? I mean, so, if there's a typo or a spelling mistake. And the problem with that is the file reviewer will come to one of 2 conclusions. Either A, you don't check your work carefully, so that's not good. Or perhaps, you don't care enough to check it, or you don't write well. So the fact of the matter is you're going to be competing with individuals who are going to be submitting perfect applications. So you have to do that too.
Mhm.
And it's important to start writing early and not rush the process. I call it a process because most of the time, if working with an advisor, there's going to be ping pong, back and forth, until the personal statement reflects you, represents you, and you're happy with it. And that's not a simple thing to do. I think most advisors they revise the statement a number of times until it's polished and it's something that really represents you well. Okay, let's move on. Great. Okay, so there are some do's and don'ts. There are some absolutes and relative no-nos. The fact of the matter is that, again, you want the personal statement to be very personal and engaging. And you don't have to start mentioning things that are already obvious and within your application, such as your MCAT score, your GPA. Of course, you want to avoid typos and spelling mistakes. You don't want to start name dropping. And of course, there's ethics and honesty, and everything that you put in the personal statement should be accurate and should reflect you. Another thing, you certainly want to mention achievements and accomplishments. That's fine. It's no time for false humility, but make sure that it's relatively current, fairly current. You know, be careful in terms of which extracurricular activities you introduce into the statement. You want to avoid simply repeating your activities list within your statement. And you want to avoid, I guess I'd call it empty platitudes or vague generalities or statements that actually don't really mean very much, to tell you the truth. You know, a statement such as, I want to go into medicine because I want to help others. Well, of course you're altruistic, but simply stating it doesn't mean very much. And I think the vast majority of individuals, they're going into it because they do want to be of service. So you're not differentiating yourself. You're not bringing anything to the table that would capture the interest of the file reviewer. And you don't want to write in the third person. Now try to avoid some some comments or statements that I'll just tell you are pretty ridiculous, such as, you know, ever since you were 4, you wanted to be a doctor. That's really not going to impress a file reviewer. Better to be honest and talk about your history and how you came to the conclusion that you wanted to be a doctor, and especially dwell on the more recent events, occurrences that led you down this career path. You also avoid the mundane, such as talking about, you know, your second cousin who suffered a broken toe. That's fine, but that's hardly inspirational. And talking about that one bad grade. Again, if there's something that was presented a great challenge, or maybe is something that will really catch the eye of a file reviewer, get ahead of the curve and talk about it. But if something is relatively common and not particularly significant, you don't have to talk about it. My general comment to those when creating a personal statement is that every word, every phrase, and every sentence should be there for a reason and should have meaning. And if it doesn't, why is it there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. One thing I wanted to just echo here, Dr. Lipsit, is try not to repeat too much of what you have in the activities. Obviously, there's probably going to be some repetition there, but try to highlight different aspects of the activities in your personal statement. And one reason, as you mentioned before, we're kind of going through the different components of the application. And when admissions committees actually go to review the application, the activities are what comes first. They get a PDF, they get your biographical information, very, very similar to the organization of this PowerPoint, your GPA, your MCAT score, then the activities, and then the personal statement. So if they read the activities and then they read the personal statement and it's very similar, it's going to be very redundant, and they probably won't want to continue reading their personal statement and won't find it very interesting.
Right. And on this very same slide, there's a very nice example of basically stating 2 facts that are true. In other words, true. I went to the university and studied biomedical engineering. On the other hand, you really grab the interest of the reader if you describe it as this example shows, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root. These were the formulas that dominated my life for many years. And that's the way that you grab the attention of the reader, and they'll want to read more. They'll want to know more about you. And ultimately, one of the goals of the personal statement is for after the file reviewer reads your personal statement, they lean back in their chair and they go, you know, I'd like to meet this person.
Mhm.
I think we need to know more. And that, of course, will lead to hopefully an invitation for interview. So that's really what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is that the next?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we'll move on. Okay. Now, picking schools to apply to tell you the truth, I kind of think that's really the last thing that you have to worry about to a large extent. You can apply really with only one school designated. And for many of you, it's not until the totality of your application is known. Often that would include maybe a final GPA or an MCAT score, where you really know what your target schools are going to be. There are a large number of allopathic and osteopathic schools, maybe 160 or 70 allopathic, and I think we're now up to somewhere in the mid-40s in terms of osteopathic schools. So there are a lot to choose from. And, you know, obviously you're going to have a limited amount of time, energy, money, and you want to have a realistic, targeted approach to your schools. And fortunately, that information is available. You know, the median MCAT score or GPA can be a guide. Usually, as a general statement, you probably want to apply to all the schools in your given state, because the fact of the matter is many schools are subsidized by their state legislature, and there's a quid pro quo, so that generally there are some quotas that will favor you for in-state schools, especially if they're public institutions. You'll want to maybe have a few reaches. You'll have maybe a few undershoots, and I hate that term because all the schools are difficult to get into. But you want to plan, and you have to cast a wide net. And we like to think that this is a very scientific process, and to some extent it is, and you have to give the committees a lot of credit. But there is also subjectivity. There is some serendipity. There's a little bit of good luck, bad luck. And you know, you never know. Sometimes maybe it'll be an alumnus of your institution. Maybe there'll be a particular feature in your application that will appeal to a committee member who will go to bat for you. You never know who your advocate is going to be on some of these committees. And some of the committees are very large. So while we want to be objective, we also know that there is some subjectivity. Cast a wide net. And also, and this is sort of a little side note, sometimes when applicants say to me, well, how can I trim my list? I've got 50 schools, this is going to drive me crazy. I'm going to get a secondary from each school. I tell them, well, you got to be happy. And the fact is, sometimes things like geography may even play a role. If there's a part of the country where you'd have no support, or maybe, you know, something as trivial as climate, let's say, still, you'll tend to do well if you're happy where you end up. Mm-hmm. And often people, depending upon where they go to school, that can also lead to contacts and where you may end up practicing. So as one of the determinants, you know, look at specific programs in these schools that might appeal to you, look at geography, and cast a wide net.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, and this is, again, important in that you only need really one school to apply. Now, many times people do want to apply to submit a complete list of schools at the time of their primary, and that's fine, But you can always follow up and instruct AMCAS to send applications to additional schools, especially if you're waiting for that MCAT score. And Sometimes I even advise applicants to maybe delay just a little bit, especially if it's a repeat MCAT. And the reason for that is you don't want your application to be evaluated or your file review to take place prior to the receipt of your MCAT score, especially if the follow-up is a higher score. And there is an opportunity in your application to notify, to designate that a follow-up MCAT score will be on the way, will be received. And that's important for you to designate that because, again, if you've taken the MCAT again and you do better, you would like to be judged on the basis of that second score. Now, different schools, it varies. Sometimes they average them. Sometimes they take the highest one. Sometimes they take the latest one. But if you have an improved score, it will always help you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One thing I wanted just to mention here, we got a question about what does it mean to be verified? So that means that once you submit your application and everything's complete, the AMCAS has received your transcripts and you've entered everything, then AMCAS actually sits down and looks at your transcripts compared to what you've actually put in the application, and they actually verify it. And that's where they come up with that GPA, like Dr. Katzen mentioned. When your application is actually verified and complete, that's where you'll get your verified GPA. And then after that verification process, that's when it's actually released to schools. When you hit submit, it doesn't go to schools. It first has to go through that verification process, which can take anywhere between like 2 to 6 weeks.
Right. Let me also bring up one quick
Sure.
thing that I know Dr. Katzen brought up, and that was the transcript request form. And even though it's not mandatory, a delay in transcripts, it's a leading cause of a delayed review.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, by uploading the transcript request form and sending it to the registrar, which will then go to AMCAS, that's one of the ways of ensuring that they put it all together and that it ends up in your file and that it is sent along and passed along and it's not waylaid. Because it's a shame if that particular technical aspect of the application delays your file review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our final poll. So what do you guys feel you need help with? Let me go ahead and pull up those results. So pretty much everything. And I agree. I think that this whole process, and, you know, I went through it several years ago, but I felt like I needed help with everything too. I mean, there's just so much and there's so many moving pieces to the application process that you really have to make sure you have all your ducks in a row and that you cross all your T's and dot your I's. I mean, not to use every cliche that I know, but it's really true. So I do agree that most people probably do need help with kind of every piece of it. And that's why we're here for you.
Let me also add, if I can, that just an objective evaluation is important because we all tend to fall in love with what we do, including myself. Mm-hmm. Having someone with a critical eye take a look, whether it's an advisor, whether it's a parent, or whether it's a counselor in your institution, but having an objective look is very important.
Yep, absolutely. And so if you guys are interested, before we go to that question and answer, definitely visit medschoolcoach.com. Email us if you have any questions. We're here to help you. We're here to give you that objective look at your personal statement and your activities, really your whole application. So definitely hit us up. We'll be happy to help you. Before we go to the Q&A, I just do want to show you guys a couple resources out there. So let me go ahead and pull up one other window. So a couple things. Perspective Doctor, you've seen the website down at the bottom. PerspectiveDoctor.com is our sister website, and there's tons of free information here. There's great articles that are published weekly. I have a podcast. If you want to hear my voice some more, please check out my podcast. Also feature some of these cool guys on there too. There's a lot of great, reliable information. Another thing that's really awesome is our PDR tools. So for all those people that are getting their applications done, you can go to the secondary essay database here, and you can actually start writing your secondaries. So if you go and you click on whatever school you're interested in, writing their secondary, it's loading very slowly. Sorry, it's my internet. Then the prompt will actually come up and you can start preparing these secondaries ahead of time, which will be huge when your inbox actually starts flooding with secondaries. Another great tool here that I wanted to show everyone is the chance predictor. So this is really great for you to help build that school list that we were talking about. You put in your GPAs, the breakdown of your MCAT, and then you'll actually get a prediction of where you're most competitive at, how many schools you should apply to, taking into effect demographical factors as well. So this is a great tool to start with. It's all free. The other thing I wanted to show people too is because we're getting a ton of questions on specific things as far as transcripts or different college credits. So check out AMCAS's applicant guide. So they pretty much will have an answer, as I was saying before, to every question you have. So you can even go into schools attended, transcript exceptions, and they will tell you which transcripts are required, which ones are not required, how to enter courses specifically. So it really has great information here. If you don't find the answer in here, which you probably will, like Dr. Katzen said, email or call AMCAS, they will provide you an answer. But most of the time, any question I get, I'll refer to this guide because it usually has an answer there. So let me move back to our Q&A. We got a lot of questions. We will not be able to answer all of them on the time given, unfortunately, but they're great questions. I'll try to answer as many as we can. And definitely check us out on medschoolcoach.com. Also, you'll get a recording of this PowerPoint after it's done. We'll also post it on our YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, so make sure to follow us there. And the other thing I do try to do as well is do a podcast with some of these remaining questions that we don't get to. So I'll probably be posting that in a couple of weeks. So if your question doesn't get answered, definitely check out our podcast. We'll try to answer some of those questions. So Dr. Katzen, I'm going to shoot a question over to you. So a lot of people have asked this question in various forms. So submitting early, I know we talked a lot about submitting early and trying to get your application in as early as possible, but what about people that haven't finished their personal statement or they're waiting for their semester to end? So how late do you suggest people submit their application?
A couple of things with that. If the issue is waiting for your final grades and your final transcript, but everything else is done, I might encourage you to go ahead and submit the application if you feel it's been done properly. I think as Dr. Lipsit pointed out, one of the most important parts is the personal statement, and you don't want to rush and complete it. You want to have it edited and reviewed by somebody besides yourself and re-edit it. I would say that, however, though, that there are probably going to be greater than 60,000 applicants this year with around 25,000 spots total. And the medical schools are not waiting till September for the Nobel laureate who got a 5.28 and a 4.0. They are beginning to review the applications earlier on. And I think there is, although I would rather the application be done well and be done thoroughly and carefully, I would prefer to see most of the applications submitted for stronger consideration earlier than later, and probably, I say, by mid to late June at the latest. As was indicated, you have the ability to indicate if a follow-up MCAT is coming, and if the first MCAT that will be entered was not where you want it, it's very possible that if you indicate another score is coming, that you would not necessarily automatically be screened out.
Great, thank you, Dr. Katzen. Dr. Lipsit, here's one for you. How does age, somebody saying relatively older in their late 20s, how does that affect admission chances?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that that years ago, being a non-traditional applicant almost took on a little bit of a negative connotation, and I don't think that's the case anymore. In fact, a number of schools are taking an increasing number of individuals with either gap time, maybe these individuals are a little later than life, making a career change. Personally, I love working with people who have rich life experiences. They may be a little older, and what we do is we emphasize their maturity, the fact that they've taken time to come to the decision that they wanted to pursue a medical career rather than directly out of college. And to be honest, it gives me a lot of material to work with. And I think the medical schools, I know in other arenas, such as MBA programs and various other graduate schools, having some post-college work experience was always valued. And I think that's being valued now. So the bottom line is that I don't think anybody should be dissuaded if they're older. And if they have a career change in mind, they should not be dissuaded. And usually we can come up with a very strong and rich application.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I agree. I totally echo that as well. I mean, there's so much more to work with. Somebody just asked on the flip side, how do younger applicants get viewed? And I think younger applicants, like I've seen a few 19-year-old, 20-year-olds. One time I interviewed with somebody and I asked them how old they were, and I think they were 17. They had somehow done college and high school and everything. And that person that I interviewed with, I mean, this is just an N of one, of course, didn't get into medical school that year. And the reason being is because, you know, you do need to show some maturity and some, you know, readiness to enter this field, and that you've actually thought through this and had some life experience to make this decision. So I think sometimes if you aren't showing those characteristics in an interview, that can count against you. Not necessarily they're going to just look at your age and say yes or no, but you need to show them the appropriate maturity throughout all stages.
Yeah, I think
go ahead, Dr. Lipsit, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I think one of the great committee failures is when they accept somebody with great credentials, very bright, but several years down the road, they go, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the individual, future patients. It's not good for the committee. And so what they want to avoid is necessarily gravitating towards outstanding candidates, but this may not be a good fit. Mm-hmm. So, and this also is related to the interview process. One of the reasons for the interview is to make absolutely sure that the candidate knows what they're getting themselves into and that it's a good fit and that this is well thought out. So that's another element. It's not just the metrics. It's making sure that this is the right career choice.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just add one point
Sure.
as well. I don't know how many BSMD candidates we have on tonight, but the ability to exhibit maturity is particularly important for the students that are BSMD candidates, particularly if they do get to the point of being invited for an interview. You know, because I personally would ask questions of a 17, 18-year-old that I wouldn't ask of a 22-year-old. Have you ever lived away from your family? You know that most college students have, but if you had the answer from a 17, 18-year-old, no, but I guess I'll be okay. I never really have. You know, that to me is an immediate rejection, because mm-hmm. I'm not confident in your maturity. How confident could I be in a decision you're really making for 6, 7 years down the road? So, you know, I think it's been emphasized a couple of times this evening, the importance of the interview, but, and in terms of age, I personally, as an interviewer for medical school, really was looking for something a little bit different for the younger they were, to make sure how mature they are, how committed they are, have they had enough experience that they're making a decision that is grounded properly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. There's a ton of questions about like grades, transcripts, how to enter a specific course. And I mean, I would love to answer that, just we do not have all the time. So I'm trying to pick the questions that are a little bit more generalizable to the entire population that's listening. So as I pointed out, that AMCAS manual, if you have any questions, check it out. And then, you know, like I said, if you can't find the answer there, email AMCAS, email us, get in touch with an advisor at Med School Coach. We'll be able to help you find an answer there. This just is a hard one to answer some of those individualized questions. Here's a question that I get pretty frequently that I'll try to answer is, in the activities section, should I include non-health related activities? So I think absolutely. So I think one thing that we kind of talked about during this webinar is trying to be a well-rounded applicant. Not only should you be well-rounded in your clinical activities like physician shadowing, volunteering, research, things like that, but you should just be well-rounded as a person. So if you want to list hobbies, if you want to list volunteer work that was outside of the clinic, if you want to list sports activities, things like that, that's totally appropriate. And I think Dr. Lipsit, Dr. Katzen would agree. We actually really like to see those things. The one caveat that I would have to that is just try to make sure that that's not all of your listings. Make sure you do have those core activities that they do want to see, but then maybe put one or two entries about your hobbies or sports or something like that. Going off of that, excuse me, Dr. Katzen, what about for the most meaningful experiences? What about if people put a non-health or non-kind of core extracurricular activity as a most meaningful experience?
I definitely do not see any problem with that at all. I think what's most important is, what did you get out of it? If you were volunteering and you were making meals for the homeless, or you participated in making a home with Habitat for Humanity, and you're able to relay to us, how did that make you feel when you saw that person who had never had a home, or how did you have a home all of a sudden, or that person who hadn't had a meal in days? This is an opportunity for you to let us know what are the things that have touched you. And it gives us an insight into your personality. It gives us an insight into the type of person you are. I don't think it's necessary that the most meaningful be medical. Sometimes if you're lacking in one area in terms of your various activities, it might be strategically an idea to use one of them as a most meaningful, to show that you were able to get something out of that type of experience, although you don't have the number of hours or the number of research activities. But they definitely, in my mind, do not have to be medical. And I think, as Dr. Lipsit was referring to with the non-traditional applicant, it's nice to hear about other things that meant something to you. One of a very interesting one I read recently was somebody that's training service dogs, and what that meant. That's obviously not medical, but the emotion that one experienced by seeing somebody in need receive the gift of a service dog was a tremendous, most meaningful, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Lipsit, here's one for you, and we get this question all the time. Should I include high school experiences on my application?
Okay. As a general rule, no. If it is something that is truly significant, almost, I hate to use this term, it's overused, but kind of transformative, and it's something that maybe also carries over into the undergraduate years. If you can make a connection, if it's something maybe that began in high school, runs through your undergraduate career, something of great personal significance, perhaps. But in general, I would avoid experiences that are isolated to high school, again, unless they are incredibly important in terms of when you tell your story. Otherwise, I would not.
I totally agree. Thank you. One person asked, and I get this question pretty commonly, is how do I list my shadowing experiences in the activities? And so I think the best way to list these is just do one entry for your shadowing. Put, I shadowed Dr. Lipsit, a radiologist, for 20 hours. I shadowed Dr. Katzen, oncology, 30 hours. And just list the physician name, their specialty, and then for how many hours. For the contact information, if it was through a specific program that you did that shadowing, then obviously put that program's contact information. If it was just individual physicians, then I recommend putting the contact information for the physician that you shadowed most significantly or the most hours. That's usually the best way to read through the shadowing experiences. It also gets pretty boring, so to speak, for lack of better words, as an admissions committee member to read shadowing experiences if they're in tons of different entries and there's a whole 700 character space to reflect on it, because really your reflections probably shadowing anybody are going to be very, very similar across the spectrum. So I think putting it into one entry is going to be the most effective way in your activity section.
One quick comment.
Yeah.
On that. In general, shadowing is an incredibly important activity because, you get to witness firsthand what a physician does. So having multiple shadowing experiences, very important. However, it's considered a passive activity, at least for most, where you're witnessing or observing. So in general, shadowing is not usually used as a most meaningful. However, if it was an extraordinary shadowing experience, that's the one time when maybe I'd break it out. In other words, you can lump together in a single category multiple shadowing experiences, the doctor, the specialty, subspecialty area, the dates and the hours, and that's listed. You could break one out separately, and you can use that as the most meaningful. So there's the possibility of doing that. In general, though, shadowing is not considered a most meaningful experience.
Mm-hmm. Great. Dr. Katzen, here's one for you that we get pretty commonly. I know that Dr. Lipsit talked about some things to avoid in the personal statement. What about I guess I'm trying to summarize multiple questions here, but what is too personal? Should people not talk about struggles with illness, personal health, mental health? What is too personal for the personal statement?
I have a couple of thoughts about that. In general, my overall attitude is I do not recommend that you attract negative attention. In other words, I failed organic the first time. Or struggles of that nature. I don't think that enhances a personal statement by any means. On occasion, there are certain struggles that I think give an insight into an individual. For example, if your family was in financial distress and you were somebody who from your teenage years had to make sacrifices, had to work to help support, there might be a value to integrating something like that. It's giving me a concept into your work ethic, into your character, and whatnot. But my general inclination is do not attract negative attention where it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that approach. If there was a significant thing that really defined you and you feel like that event or that personal experience is maybe, really part of your identity, then you can talk about it. However, you just need to have a lot of finesse, realize that whatever you put in the personal statement is fair game to being discussed amongst the admissions committees during interviews. So if you are, hesitant or you're questioning it at all, probably best to leave it out. That's kind of, I think, the best way to think of it as well. Actually, quite a few people asked, 25 to 35 schools, that's a ton. I really apply to that many. And my answer is yes. I think if you are a top tier applicant, and maybe you have a 520 MCAT, a 4.0, great extracurricular activities, you can probably limit that to 20 or so. But for the people that are more middle of the road applicants or some of the lower, less competitive applicants, I push that number higher. The fact of the matter is, it is just so competitive to get into medical school. Like Sean Bean is saying in my little meme here, one does not simply get into medical school. So you need to make sure that you're optimizing every factor, and that includes the school list. So you want to, as Dr. Lipsit, target those schools where you're most competitive at. Make sure that they accept a lot of out-of-state students and cast a wide net as much as possible. It's expensive, yes. It's time-consuming, yes. But remember, the money is a drop in the bucket for what medical school will actually cost you. And number two, the time taken. This is a marathon. Applying to medical school, completing medical school, residency, it is a marathon. This is just one tiny aspect of that marathon. So make sure you put the effort in now. Dr. Lipsit, I had a question for you. Can you talk a little bit about secondaries briefly? What to expect on the timing of secondaries? How do I get secondaries from every school? I know we didn't really focus this presentation on that, but if you could just give a quick overview, because there are quite a few questions about secondaries.
Sure. Years ago, the schools were somewhat selective in terms of sending out secondaries. Now, with the huge volume of applications they receive, most of the schools will send out a secondary almost as a reflex. I mean, they're notified that you've applied to the school and you're going to receive a secondary. And the nature of the secondaries, it varies widely. Some are more challenging than others. What you'll find, though, is that initially it may be time-consuming and challenging, but then eventually you, especially those people who are saying 20, 30 applications, my God. But the fact of the matter is that after you get through a certain number of secondaries, I don't know, half a dozen or 10 or whatever it is, after that, obviously it's going to be easier because the same questions are asked over and over again. And you'll find that you've already answered, many of the questions. Now, the other thing is, for many schools, your file is really not considered complete until they get the secondary. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed with some applicants is that they're really on top of things. At the stroke of midnight, when AMCAS or AACOMAS opens their doors, the TMDSAS, boom, they get it in. But then they start to lose some steam. And the secondaries pile up and they get stuffed in drawers. And the fact of the matter is, you've really undermined the benefits of an early application. Right. So my recommendation is you have to be methodical. As they're received, you got to crank them out. I mean, with care, of course, but you must get them out in a timely manner. I usually suggest within a few days, maybe at most. But you don't want to fall behind because then this whole idea of applying early falls by the wayside because you've procrastinated with your secondaries. But again, I would encourage people because, after you've delved into the secondaries and you've completed, again, 5, 10, whatever it is, it becomes easier.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Lipsit. Everyone, I know there's so many good questions out there. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to get to them all. It is a little bit after 9 right now on the East Coast time, so we're going to wrap up. Visit us at medschoolcoach.com, perspectivedoctor.com, like I mentioned. We'll be happy to be that objective eye, help you through this entire process. Make sure that you are getting your application done and on time, and making sure that you put together a great application. Also, we do MCAT preparation, tutoring, USMLE tutoring too. So when you get to that point, we're here for you along the line. As I said earlier, you'll get an email with the download for this webinar. I will try to answer some questions on a podcast also. And then make sure you check us out on Perspective Doctor, all of our social media pages. There's tons of information there that is just free and available for you guys. Dr. Lipsit, Dr. Katzen, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You're welcome. Enjoy
Glad
it.
to participate, and good luck to everyone.
Good luck.
All right. Good night.
Good night.